Okay, so let's talk about Hamlet now. So I've mentioned that we're going to be looking at all these different philosophers, and that the philosophers are going to that's going to be our semester. But here's the thing: the philosophers are all the philosophers we're looking at are making a lot of comments about, I don't know, art in general, literature. They're going to say things like all art should be like this, all literature should look like this. This is what makes a good poem is this. What makes a good whatever is this. Um, and they sometimes, when you read their work, they have examples in their books. But one of the problems with reading this kind of stuff is that, do you know the examples? Um, so, like, there's one of the philosophers we're going to look at. He has a whole theory about how words work. And his example is from a book by Rousseau. Well, I mean, I read that book years ago. I don't really remember it so good. And it's like 800 pages long, and we can't be reading all the examples on top of all of what these people are saying. So what my plan to solve this problem is that we need one example that we can use for the whole semester, that we'll all know. If we took one piece of art, one piece of literature, and learned it, then we would be able to use that piece of literature. Because there's nothing. If I come in a classroom, there's no way for me to know if you. There's no book I could pick that everybody in the course has read. Um, it's just not. I'm sorry, it looks like something on my face here. There's no book I could pick that you've all read. Um, and it also would have to be a pretty interesting book for all the philosophers to have something to connect to. Um, so what my plan is that we should study Hamlet for a couple of reasons. Number one, you guys are English majors. English majors should know Hamlet. It's one of the most famous works of literature, one of the sort of greatest works of literature of all time, that kind of thing. People say big things about Shakespeare's Hamlet. So, for starters, since you're all English majors, it's a very, very good thing for you to know a lot about. Um, the the other thing about Hamlet is it's complicated. It's the kind of thing people talk about and talk about and talk about and talk about, and so it's a big, rich text. Harold Bloom, who's a philosopher that I quite like, called it well, in the play they refer to the poem unlimited. One of the characters says that about something. Um, and Harold Bloom calls it the poem unlimited. It's got everything in it. It's this great work of art that has piles and piles of interesting things in it. So it seemed like a good text to do. Plus, it's very famous. It's very complicated. It's like relatively short. I know it's not going to seem short, but like a novel would take many hours. Like a solid novel, like a big 300-page novel, could be like a 8-10 hour read. And of course, novels are sometimes a lot longer than that, and they're complicated. You got to read them slow. But Hamlet is the kind of thing where you could watch a movie version of Hamlet, and it would be over in 2 to 4 hours. Um, that's helpful for us in this course, because it means that it's if you can get a movie version of it, and I'm going to have some links and information about where you can go for movie versions of it. I'm a big fan of movie versions of Hamlet, actually. I know a lot of your teachers don't want you to watch the movie instead of reading the book, but Hamlet's a little bit different because it's meant to be a play, and so a movie version is sort of like a play where they actually say all the words that Shakespeare wrote. Whereas when they make a movie out of a book, they tend to just like make up new dialogue. They don't follow the book they follow the plot of the book that closely, but not the words. Whereas with Hamlet, they follow the words. So it's a good thing that you can knock out in a movie pretty good. So there's a bunch of different versions of it, and I'll give you some links and some suggestions of what to watch and where to go for it. Um, but I thought Hamlet would be a good thing for us both to know as English majors. I keep saying English majors, but writing and lit majors. It seemed like a useful thing for you guys to know about. But also, we're going to sort of find out about it at the beginning. I'm going to ask you guys to watch a movie or read it or both or study it in some way. And then that way, for the rest of the term, when I'm talking about a philosopher, I can always connect it to Hamlet, and you will know what I'm talking about. So this does kind of double duty. It's a sort of a useful thing because it fulfills a bunch of different stuff. It lets you get very familiar with a very famous work of art. It's easily digestible in movie form, and it's also going to work. It's so complicated that all the philosophers I can connect to Hamlet. Hamlet's the kind of thing that people have been talking about for hundreds of years. Whereas, like, if I picked something like Avengers Endgame, I think I would be able to connect many of the philosophers to Avengers Endgame. But I would hit some limits. There would be some problems there. It wouldn't really make sense. So that's the plan with Hamlet. So I'm going to recommend that you read Hamlet. and that you watch a movie version of Hamlet, that you study Hamlet a little bit. There's a lot of resources out there. It's pretty easy to do. But the main thing is watch a movie version of Hamlet. On YouTube, they even have some full-length movies. You can like literally put in Hamlet full play, and you can just like watch the entire thing on YouTube for free. You could rent it for like $2 or $3. On different kinds of platforms like Apple and Amazon. You can watch Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet from 1996. That version, by the way, is 4 hours long. But if you watch that whole movie, you have read the entire book. Like watching that movie is reading the play from cover to, because they use every single word that Shakespeare wrote. They stick in that play, in that movie. So that's probably the one I would recommend is Kenneth Branagh's 1996 Hamlet, which you can buy for a couple of bucks. And I can help you find that and locate it. I'll put some information up on the website about it. But that's basically it. That's the plan for Hamlet. So the semester is we're going to go through like 15 philosophers and discuss them and try to understand what they're saying and what they mean and their valuable contribution to whatever thought. And then once we've got that, and then we're going to be using Hamlet along the way. And sometimes the Hamlet stuff will get so complicated that I'll actually put the philosopher down for a second and teach a whole lesson just about Hamlet. And then that way, and then when the lesson's over, then we can connect everything I said about Hamlet back to whatever philosopher we were looking at. But that's the semester. Okay, cool. The philosophers, and I gave you a copy of Hamlet on the website. It's a little hard to read the copy I gave you. The advantage of it is it's completely free. The disadvantage is not many footnotes. So you might want to get a version that has some footnotes. I recommend something called the No Fear Shakespeare edition of Hamlet. If you look up No Fear Shakespeare Hamlet, it'll come up pretty quickly. It's on SparkNotes. You can actually read it on the website for free. You can buy a copy of the book for like $5. It's useful because what it does is it takes Shakespeare and it translates it into modern English, which is pretty useful. So that way, and now I realize what most people do is they don't read Hamlet at all. And the second thing people do is if they get a book like this with a modern day translation, they just read the modern day translation. First of all, they don't read Hamlet at all. Then maybe if the teacher makes them read Hamlet, they might read a summary, and they might maybe they would watch a movie. If they get the No Fear Shakespeare edition, which has modern day English on one side and Shakespeare on the other, they just read the modern day English, and they skip the actual words Shakespeare wrote. All of these things are not necessarily bad. They're not bad to do. I don't hate people that do any of that stuff. That seems like a perfectly good way to get into Hamlet. But unless you're reading Shakespeare's actual words, I'm not really sure you're not doing Shakespeare. You're doing something else. The trick is to use the summary, the modern day translation, the movie. Use those things to help you understand the words Shakespeare wrote. So that's my recommendation for kind of going after Hamlet is use whatever you want. You want to go and read a Wikipedia summary of Hamlet? Do it. It will help you understand the play if you ever sit down to read it. What teachers don't, I know teachers get mad about, oh, the student just read a summary, or oh, the student saw the movie and they didn't read the book. They just don't want students doing that instead of reading the book. And you understand that. If you have a favorite movie and you tell your best friend, this is my favorite movie, you should watch it, and then instead of watching it, they go and they just look it up on Wikipedia and read a summary of it, that's not the same thing. You can't get like a Wikipedia summary of an action, like I can't get a Wikipedia summary of John Wick. It will tell you he fought this guy, he fought this guy, he fought this guy, and then he won. But the whole thing about John Wick is you gotta watch him do all the kicking and the punching. That's what makes the movie worth watching. And the thing that makes Shakespeare worth reading is the actual words that he chose. So use the summary, use the modern day translation, use YouTube videos explaining it to you. There's all kinds of stuff you can use. So use this stuff to help sort of think about Shakespeare, but spend some time with Hamlet, because that's going to be sort of the center point for the semester. If you decide not to follow Hamlet at all, it's going to make the videos harder to. It's going to make the lectures about the philosophers harder to follow, because I'm going to keep connecting it to Hamlet, and you're going to be like, oh, it's close enough, I can figure it out. You're going to be bored out of your mind because I'm going to keep talking about a play that you don't know, and listening to someone talk about a work of art that you have no idea what it is really boring. If you've ever been like at a dinner and everybody's talking about a movie and you haven't seen the movie, you're going to be bored. Same thing here. We're going to look at philosophers, and I'm going to try to connect it to Hamlet whenever I can, and you're going to be bored if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, if you don't know who the characters are, for example. So, do a little research, find out about Hamlet, and all right, looking good. First day of class, going pretty well.